Hello everyone, my name is Uthris, and welcome to Planet Coaster. Today we are doing another kind of one-off build structure. Last time we built a Japanese onsen, or what I presume to be a roughly accurate Japanese onsen, and today we are going to be building a World of Warcraft structure. It's been a while since we did something specifically from World of Warcraft. As you guys know, WoW was a big part of my gaming history. Spent a lot of hours in Warcraft 3, spent a lot of hours in World of Warcraft, all the way up through Wrath of the Lich King. I kind of stopped playing about that point, but today we're going to be building kind of an iconic structure from the World of Warcraft universe, and that is the Human Town Hall. And this is going to be like the low tier version, so tier 1. If you guys played the strategy game. I might end up making tier 2 and tier 3, I don't know, depends on how well received this structure is, but it presented a unique little challenge, which was to get this tower constructed in a reasonable fashion. As you know, when you're doing spires or anything like that, it's far more efficient to do one specific side and just copy and rotate that over. Another thing about this tower is that it has a slight slope to it. So it tapers, it gets pretty wide at the bottom, and then it tapers off right up to underneath the clock face itself. So that's what we're kind of trying to establish early on. And it's doing a pretty good job at that. I'm using the back of one of the castle windows because there's no real thin plaster piece that I can use really otherwise. And what you'll notice and how I'm gonna go about doing this is that I'll first go ahead, make one side and get that slope. So that's kind of the left facing slope, and then just get one corner kind of fleshed out. This is kind of what we did a lot in the core build as well. And once you kind of get one corner and maybe a support column in here like this, you will be able to copy that over and essentially seal off all four sides. Whenever I do kind of tower-esque or spire-esque structures in Planet Coaster, I kind of test it in multiple steps. First step generally is to get the base shape, and then once we get the base shape, we worry about the detailing of the wall face itself, and then we worry about the spire top, the rooftop. So that's kind of my thought process when I go into these. Initially, we were going to use this clock face. It's a bit smaller one, but it's ornate, which is good. The bigger one wasn't quite fitting in the initial box that I laid out. However, looking at all my reference images from Google and my experience in Warcraft 3, it just felt really small. It didn't feel like it was the correct size. So what I end up doing is going back, deleting that, and upgrading it to the large clock face, and then just adjusting the size of this. Because again, we only need to build one side, and then once that's copied and pasted over on all four, you're essentially done. So getting one side detailed out is quicker than doing four of the same kind of detail even on a smaller clock. There are little areas where the clock kind of doesn't cover, of course. Trying to fit a circular object in a square peg just doesn't quite work. So you have to cover up some of the edges there. But otherwise, it's a decent fit, and I'm quite happy with that. We are also going to be trying to capture some of the signature woodwork that you guys are pretty used to seeing if you are fans of Warcraft in any way. Very kind of thick, exaggerated roof lines, and beamwork along certain areas. And the tower has a nice kind of diamond shape going up its full kind of spire, and it turned out to be a pretty good design. Even though like the bottom doesn't necessarily fully match, that's okay, because in Warcraft 3 that bottom doesn't fully match either. So it's kind of funny how I'm kind of eyeballing this, right? I'm not making exact measurements. I didn't boot up World of Warcraft and try and run around one of these. It's a lot from memory and just a couple Google searches, and you're able to recreate something that gives off the feeling. And in the end result, I'm pretty happy with the scale of it. Much in the same that I was happy with the Cathedral of Light that we made, probably over a year ago at this point. And at this point, we might consider making Stormwind at sometime soon. I don't quite know if people really want to see a specific recreation build. It would be similar to Korra in that sense, but I think it would be fun to do nonetheless. We have the rooftop being laid out now, so you can see we tested the sides, got the details in, tested that, and then now we are moving to the rooftop. And luckily it's a square tower. We only have to make one side copied over 4 times. If we went with more faces on the rooftop, we would have to, of course, just make a slice of that pie and then copy that over as many times necessary to get the full rotation. So sometimes it's easier to do this, sometimes maybe not so much. So my trick for these is that I get the left and right sides kind of measured out and get it pretty exact. And you don't have to be down to the millimeter on these things. Generally, a roof is pretty detailed looking, and as long as nothing's crazily off, it'll look correct regardless. And you'll notice that I'll occasionally throw in this temporary beam. The temporary beam is to actually give me the angles of the shingles, because you'll notice the left and the right side, they're actually angled to be facing outwards from the corners. So the corners are flat. That doesn't really help us at all with shingle placement. It helps us with the border, but not really get the angle we need to follow the line. So that's what that extra wooden plank does. Another cool thing about these shingles, because we're kind of hand placing these, and not only do they, in my opinion, fit the art style of Warcraft a little bit more than, say, the default roof pieces in Planet Coaster, you are able to get a little bit more detail in these than you could say otherwise. The nice thing about them is that we can actually stagger them like roof tiles, and also not only stagger them from the left and the right, but also vertically a little bit, so we get some nice looking shadows, kind of drawing those horizontal and vertical lines for us. And you know, it's, in my opinion, a step that is really worth doing, something that I enjoy immensely, especially in Alpine Odyssey, where we do that a lot in the European section there. It's just kind of the same technique. So at this point, we just have kind of the base structure to timber frame. We're not gonna do any kind of yard work around the structure, because I don't know if I want to use it eventually again. So we're gonna leave it just the building. So you won't see any of that this episode, but you'll just see just some standard timber framing the rest of the way here, and a nice little footer made of stone going across the bottom. It's somewhat in the game, but also somewhat just my style creeping in. I really like to see stone kind of foundations going across buildings. To me, it makes the most sense. You know, you don't want wood touching ground, moisture and everything, really bad for that, and it also just makes the whole thing look a little bit more sturdy than if it was 100% just timber and plaster going from the roof to the floor there. The windows, probably not exactly correct as well. However, I do remember from my time playing WoW is that inside these buildings, you have kind of a lower section, and then where kind of the town magistrate would stand would be raised up on one side, and that's usually as you walk in to the right. So you'll notice the left half of the building has lower set windows to the right half of the building. The right half, we actually raise them up to the upper half of the block, because to me, there was that interior platform. And so to represent that, even though you don't have all the information on the outside, you could have some extra information by simply just looking at window placement, where the floors are and things like that. Out here, we are doing some more roof tiling, kind of the par for the course at this point. You know, last episode we spent a lot of time on the Asian route, and now we're spending a lot of time on these fantasy kind of European style, but it's worth to do. Luckily, once you get the tiling kind of set, it's a general procedure just to get these laid out. Granted, it does increase your part count a lot, and that's also another reason why we kind of really use this style on lesser detailed buildings, where the roof is kind of almost a detail in itself, more so than maybe some of the building supports. And the block we used here, it does have the kind of wooden flange to connect to other surfaces. This is actually a block that you would more or less put flush to the side to create just like a windowsill or something like that, some minor wooden detail. Since we're using it as a roof, I have to try and tie those beams in. And so I kind of came up with this structure. So this structure is just like a wooden lattice kind of coming out and following the roof line a little bit. It's not really technically off of anything that I know that I'm taking kind of unknowingly, you know? Like sometimes you build enough structures and you start kind of mixing matching structures and influences without really realizing where you're getting it from. So I might be running into that a little bit here, but that little wooden roof element's just there to give us that extra little bit of detail along the roof line and to help hide the ugliness that is kind of the default tiling that you get when you do things like this. But you know, that's just kind of one of the things you have to deal with. But I think it just adds a nice little front end and a little bit of a cottage look, in my opinion, to it. So at this point, we have a lot of the roof line kind of covered. We're gonna copy and paste a lot of the wooden textures from, you know, the sides, get those placed around to both ends, and really just kind of continue the theme that we kind of started on the front end all the way across to the sides and back side. Now, it's kind of interesting, in Warcraft 3, you don't really see the backside of these buildings, so I don't quite 100% know what they look like. I don't remember running to the back end of these either in a lot in World of Warcraft, so I'm kind of doing the same thing as earlier, kind of gauging where I would put the windows. But, you know, it doesn't have to be 100% accurate. It can just be accurate enough to where people who have played Warcraft, they'll recognize this building almost immediately. We're also going to raise the foundation up a little bit because there are usually steps going into these. Now, usually there's more steps than just 2, but I'm just starting with 2. And if I want to make a variant that's even higher off the ground, I can. We just need to kind of reinforce the stone columns and pillars like that just to make it look nice and flush and heavier and load bearing. We'll also try and split this from the right side to the left side and try and mix up the styles of wood here. Once you get the standard box trim in there, you're kind of free to do your own thing. So the left side will be more reminiscent to the front, how that window's up higher, because again, in the interior, we know there's kind of that raised up section. And we'll try and get some diagonals in here. Not a whole lot of diagonal beam work, but you know, enough to keep it interesting. And then along the back side on the first floor is just kind of a simple row of windows, just to let in a lot of light. If I remember correctly, there's usually a large table roughly in that area, which I think would do well to serving some guests. So with that, we are coming to the end of today's speed build. I know it's a little bit shorter than the last one, but that's fine. I'm fine with doing shorter, smaller, cool little builds for you guys. And we're gonna go ahead and take a look at this in real time so you guys can see kind of just how it looks in a slower pace, gives your feedback, and then we'll end the episode there. Okay, so here we are, taking a look at the finished Tier 1 Town Hall for the human faction of Warcraft, and I think it turned out pretty well. It has the silhouette that this building should have, and it reads from afar and up close pretty much exactly how I wanted. It's a little bit off in coloration, which is fine. I'm sure there's plenty of variations of these really built in Warcraft, so I'm not overly worried about that. But I will say, with the red roof and kind of just plain plaster, to me, it kind of just looks like Lakeshire all over again. You know, I just half expect to see a bridge off to the side that still needs repairing after, you know, 15 years. But yeah, this is it. I know it's a small structure, but sometimes just this simple and clean look can be a little challenging for some people to do. You know, you're kind of so used to throwing in so many crazy details to just be like, oh, this has to be the best thing ever. But in reality, simple and clean can have its own quality to it a lot of the times. And I think this achieves this quite nicely. Now, not to say there isn't any detail in this. We did, of course, add some of this effect, but that's to try and make these wooden pieces make a little bit more sense. But I just really like it. It makes me want to start up WoW, or just play some classic Frozen Throne and have a good old time. Probably one of my favorite things about it is that if I actually go up here, now I don't have the rest of like the yard or anything. Again, I don't know where I'm going to use this yet, and so I'm holding back on that a little bit. But if I just go and say rotate like this, it just feels like I'm looking down at a Warcraft 3 asset. You know, you just zoom out a lot, and you just picture your peasants carrying gold back and forth from here to there. Maybe I'll make a gold mine next. That would be cool to do. And then a tier 2. I don't know. Warcraft has so many cool iconic structures that at this point, oh my god, the clock is going crazy. At this point, I would just love to build just a whole series on Warcraft. Maybe I'll make Stormwind at some point. That would be really cool. Anyways, that's it for this episode of the build series. Again, I know not much, you know, texture work or groundwork along the building, but that's okay. So if you missed the last episode in the background there is the Japanese onsen. You can go and watch that video if you missed that. Thank you guys, though, who did stop by and take a look at this one. We are done for today. If you guys enjoyed the content, feel free to subscribe for more creative goodness such as this. Hit that like button, and I'll see you all in the next video.